Hey guys, I literally just pulled into a parking lot and decided to throw in this video. I've just been getting some really interesting downloads the last few days, different things coming through, and I think some of the spiritual work I've been doing is starting to come to harvest. And I've been getting these little snippets of little spiritual emotional downloads that I'm always wanting to I wish I had a pen and paper so I could write down that thought. And sometimes I'll start a text message to write it out so that I can come to it later and write it out. But really, I think it might be best for me to sort of approach these thoughts as rather than something to hang on to, fear of forgetting, or I'm going to lose that insight if I don't write it down. I think it's okay to write it down. It's good to do that, but it's okay to just let that come through as well and release the ego end of it that is I have to hang on to this or I can't move forward or something. So what just came through, and this probably will seem pretty random to a lot of you. Hold on.
Piece the eggshells together.
I just did!
Just for 1 minute, okay? One thing that came through was I've been thinking a lot about the nature of relationships and polyamory and open relationships and things like that. And I'm very drawn to the detachment that has to come with open relationships, and you really have to be free from being rooted in that place of jealousy and control, and have a much more open heart and mind to things, to, for lack of a better term, be interested in polyamory. And I was just thinking about how I don't even know what started it. I was thinking about my birthmarks, and this is just the way the thoughts have been, is I'm thinking about the most random thing, and that leads to another thought, which leads to another thought, which becomes some sort of insight that seems so random to have occurred. I was thinking about these birthmarks, and I was thinking how my father has two exact birthmarks, but they're moles, and they're on the other side. And I was thinking, it's funny because you'd almost think that, how birthmarks and things like that tend to be imprints from a past life or something like that. Some unhealed karma or something, is what is said. And I was thinking it's funny, that I would almost think that we were attached because we have the same markings, except his are moles and mine are birthmark freckles, and his are on the opposite side. And I was just thinking about the changing nature of relationships and the fluidity there. And at times I wonder, what have my current father and I what have we been to each other in other lifetimes? Because we have a very special connection, and in a lot of ways we are, we have had a history of a tumultuous relationship. We have had a history of a very unique and close relationship in ways, but there's a lot of, it feels like unfinished business with our relationship, unsaid things, sort of that feeling of you're never going to fully get what you want from this soul to heal your own sort of thing. And I was just thinking about how, because we have sort of this up and down sort of emotional thing happening with our relationship, that I wonder if in other lives, has he been to me a partner? Has he been to me a brother? What is the past nature of this relationship? In that now he is a parent figure and has had much more control over me and dictated a lot of my life choices. And I see a potential pattern of karma working itself out between us. And for some reason that led me into this thought about how I've been thinking about polyamory, and it makes sense then to sort of release that thought of, this is my one and only soulmate and love of my life and all of this. Because if you really want to enjoy the positive sides of reincarnation and thinking, I get to see my loved ones again, and even if they are not in the future to me what they are to me now, it's your soul. It's their soul that you love, that you cherish. And not so much necessarily the dynamic of the relationship. So, for example, maybe my father was to me, a spouse in a past life. And, maybe say he passed on before me, and that spouse, that loss caused me pain. And I thought, will I ever see my husband again or my wife again? Or whatever. There's a comfort in knowing you do see them again, but that relationship is always going to be evolving and changing, in that in the next life he's my father, or maybe in my next life he'll be my uncle, or my aunt, or whatever, maybe my best friend, and so it makes sense then that in this life we have that opportunity to detach from this is my only soulmate, this is my only love of my life, this is my only relationship I'm going to have with my mother, or whatever, but especially romantically speaking, that it makes sense to sort of just love that person's soul for where they are right now, for who they are truly, not necessarily the things they're doing or the struggles they're having, because the only thing that's going to continue on is that love. The only thing that's going to continue on is the essence of their soul, and not your relationship dynamic. So it makes sense. For example, my partner now, my spouse, I can see in him a lot of things as a friend. I can see in him a brother-like figure, a romantic figure, a confidant. And, maybe, it makes sense for us to release that, this is my only love, this is my only person, I can't imagine him being something else. And instead to cherish that soul as it is, feeling grateful for the role they're playing in your life now, and then be open to, I do get to see you again, and I get to explore this new, fluid, changing way that all these relationships will become to me. And there's a beauty in it not being stagnant. There's a beauty in, my brother and I aren't close in this life, really. And, it's neat to think, it's really cool that I got to experience this kind of strange relationship between my brother and I right now in this life. And I'm really excited to see what will be for us in the next life between his soul and mine. How will that change? How will it evolve? And the same for my father, I think that it has been a very interesting ride, an interesting dynamic to see how it plays out when he's a father figure to me, when his soul is sort of in charge of me, and all of that in growing up, how he sort of shaped what he wants me to be. And then maybe in the next life, it will be my turn to shape how I want him to be. Maybe I'll be his parent or whatever, but all these parent figures, brother figures, friend figures, at some point in your soul circle, in your soul cluster, they may be a lover or a sibling again, or a parent again, or something completely different. Maybe a teacher in the next life, whatever. But you have this soul cluster, and it's just so interesting to learn to be grateful for what that is meant to be teaching you now, for what this dynamic is to you. For example, I have a sister that I have such a strained relationship with, and not in that we're at each other, but that her energy and my energy are oil and water. Is that right? Yeah. And I think there's a lot going on there, and it's just really interesting to see it played out the way it is, and feeling like we're such different people. And then, I'm open to seeing how that changes in the next life. And so the moral of the story here of what my sort of download was, if this is even making sense, it makes sense in my head, and I really don't know if it makes sense coming out of my mouth. So I'm sorry if it doesn't, but just thinking, to be grateful for the different teachers we have in this life and the different relationship dynamics, but also to be open to being fluid, that this person not only needs to stay a lover in the next life, but can also not stay a lover in this life. It's okay to have these things change and evolve, and just be grateful for the different entities they become, the different dynamics they offer, the different lessons they teach. And in so doing, we get growth out of it as well. So very interesting. So this is one way to do it. As I got a download, I recorded it, and I don't know if it made a lot of sense, but now I'm going to go to Sally's and get my hair dye. So yeah, I was literally just like driving here, and I'm like, what's happening in my brain? And I had several of these. I actually made my first ancestral prayer last night that I think I would like to record. That was a lot of fun, just letting what I wanted to say kind of flow out of me to my ancestors and asking them for their guidance, sort of like, hey, I'm aware of you now. I didn't know how I felt about the idea of ancestors before, because growing up it was like, you live, you die, you're in heaven. So some of these things are new to me to sort of come around to and explore, but I do feel that. But I feel like ancestors is loose, because in the old days, you're thinking like all those that have died and gone on before have crossed over, are ancestors that we can seek for guidance. But some of those ancestors, and probably most of them, are probably currently incarnate. And so it's their soul's experience you're seeking, really, you know? My brain has been on fire lately, so I am going to just make that into another video. Hope you guys are all doing well, and I will check back in soon. Bye!